The tension had been building over the weekend, and on Sunday night in bed, I put my arm around you as usual, and you'd acquiesced, for not to do so would have invited questions, I suppose you thought, but I sensed that mentally and spiritually you were far away from me. There is nothing more lonely than sharing a pillow with someone when the attachment between you has frayed. If anything, that warm body beside you serves only to highlight your own isolation. And the comfort you feel now seems false, illusory, treacherous even, and all the more poignant since you suspect it will be taken from you soon. I felt that spiky unease you get when two people pretend that everything is okay when it very clearly isn't, or at least when they postpone addressing the real issue for the sake of appearances, expediency, or simply so that they can get some rest. I'm hypersensitive to people's disapproval of me, to their moods. It's an awareness I picked up in childhood, a necessary tool for self-protection. But that didn't prevent me from falling into a deep sleep. Sleep is my drug of choice these days, and perhaps it always was, since even in those seasons stained by my most unbridled alcoholic excesses, all I really craved was unconsciousness. The heightened joy of the preliminary carouse was mere foreplay. Oblivion was the climax. And so I soon descended into the fog of sleep, first passing through pleasant antechambers of forgetfulness, where the pain in my heart was first eased and then eradicated entirely when that joyful blackness arrived. Morning, already. Too soon. We experience different kinds of nights we wish would go on forever. Those whose pleasures are so acute we hope never to come down from them. And those on the eve of some terrible day of reckoning, like when the condemned man is sentenced to ascend the scaffold in the morning and hopes the night will not cease. And so as morning penetrated your room from behind the blinds, I quaked inwardly and shut my eyes tighter, as though by sheer effort of will, falling back into sleep, I could reverse the course of time and bring back night and safety. You rose, put on the television as usual, and asked me if I would like a cup of coffee. I said yes, and you walked out of the room, having put on your dressing gown, without looking back at me. As before, tension pervaded all. The power of the unspoken seemed to dominate and overpower, crowding out every other feeling. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew something was up. In a way, I hoped for a breakup. The relationship had been weighing down on me. We'd reconciled a few months before, having split for several days over a misunderstanding before Christmas. But the fundamental issues between us remained. My job and my desire to travel, to escape the quotidian London life, and, importantly, to create compelling content for my business, that hateful phrase, seemed wholly at odds with cozy monogamy, and I had no idea how to align these hopelessly disparate elements of my life. But at the same time, I also knew that losing you would kill me. The atmosphere when a fundamental breakdown in a relationship looms is singular. I suppose it's akin to those moments just before a war erupts. Peace remains, the status quo remains, and yet nerves are in tatters. For what may be about to happen, and you never know until it does, represents a wildness beyond comprehension, where the rulebook is ripped up and whatever carefully constructed understanding you built up between you has exploded. Once familiar terrain is ripped apart, and those structures you built lovingly together are razed to the ground. This is why breakups are so painful. They are brutal acts that can only be accomplished through dirty warfare. They leave casualties, and no one gets away unscathed. Neither the instigator nor victim. You cannot successfully untangle two lives that have been long connected without damage. Things get broken, both you and the other person, most of all. How will you do it, I wondered. And I thought of that moment in 1984 when Winston Smith, captured by the party, wonders where on his body the first blow from the secret police will land. What will you say? What words will you use to dismiss me from your life. After a while, you came back into the room with a cup of coffee for me and a note written on a folded up piece of paper. It was graph paper, as I remember, for no good reason now. It's surprising how such details linger. You walked off and I opened the note. Your handwriting looked slender and youthful, touchingly vulnerable. I can't trust you, the note said. I don't like what you do for work. I don't like how you didn't tell me you were planning to go to Las Vegas without me. And I don't know what you're doing behind my back with other women. The note was unsigned. It was a simple statement of fact without apology or instruction. Darling, I said, and I came and sat down next to you on the bed where you had positioned yourself and now had tears in your eyes. I put my arm around you and pulled you towards me in the old way, but the gesture felt forced and hollow. There was no old way anymore. The note and the declaration of intent implied by the note had changed all that. All of a sudden, we were in no man's land. I'm not well, she said. I've been suffering from anxiety. I think you should get your things and leave. You really want to do this now? I said. She nodded, silently. Well, I tried a few more words. Weak counterpoint. Hollow, hollow, hollow. Her accusations were largely true, and even though I loved her with all my heart, that didn't negate them. And as I've said, I was myself ambivalent about the direction of the relationship. Was this the easy way out I thought might be best for both of us? Naive to think there could be any easy way out. Plus, in spite of the ridiculousness of the impulse, I felt angry. Angry that she could do this to me. I gathered up my few things and headed for the door. I'm sorry, she said, jumping up. And as I opened the door and stepped into the hallway beyond, she followed me out barefoot, still in her nightie, an anguished look in her eyes. Could I have paused? Tried another avenue? Begged for forgiveness? Promised to do better? Perhaps. But this was what she wanted after all. Get well, I said, and I took her in my arms and held her close to me for a moment. And then I walked to the elevator without looking back. I heard the door shut and the lock turning from the inside. An hour or so later, I found myself sitting in a cafe in Soho in that dazed, emotional state I always inhabit at times of emotional trauma. I'd ordered a coffee and was staring out into the street, too upset to go home just yet and wondering what the hell I should do next. But this wasn't any ordinary day. Because you see, on television the previous night, an unkempt man in an ill-fitting suit with unruly blonde hair had addressed the nation. He had told us that, really, under the circumstances, what with all things being considered and that, it would be jolly spiffing if we all stayed at home and avoided one another. At least for the foreseeable. Until things with this damned beastly illness calm down. So a bit of sport, won't you, chaps? In response, as I sat there looking out onto Frith Street, society, as we knew it, was preparing to shut down. Cafes that I once frequented were boarding up their doors and windows. A premises where I previously attended recovery meetings had shut up shop, and signs were being affixed to the inside of windows. Sorry, we're closed. To be repudiated by one's lover is bad enough. For it to happen at what it felt like the onset of a dystopian sci-fi movie, the like of which none of us had ever experienced in our lives before, seemed like carelessness. Perhaps you felt something of the same sentiment. A while later, a WhatsApp message appeared on my phone. I'm sorry, you wrote. I love you. You meant everything to me. This feels like the end of the world. I hesitated for a while and stared out the window once more. It was grey morning and the usually busy streets were nearly empty. It felt like the Sunday following a nuclear disaster. Shall I come back? I wrote. Sometime later I received your reply. Yes, you said.